Hey everybody, it's Tracy. And so last month of February, when the SEC issued a Wells notice to Paxos, the issuer of BUSD, the Binance stablecoin, the allegation that brought about the potential enforcement or criminal action was that the stablecoin represented a security. And you can go through like Howie and all these things, and it, in my opinion, it doesn't seemingly apply in any way, right? Other than the fact that it's centralized, right? Like Paxos, Binance control it. And you can also argue that maybe regulators just don't like Binance, which makes a lot of sense and it's probably true. So you look at other attempts, right, to regulate stablecoins, centralized stablecoins, USDT, USDC, and most of them center around like requiring the issuers thereof to get banking licenses or something similar to that. And that may make sense, may not. I don't know what a banking license necessarily does, but the reality is there's been so much talk on social media about the rising importance of decentralized DeFi stablecoins, Frax, LUSD, DAI, etc. And it's a bit misguided, right? Because the reality is, and I've talked about this before, but the fact that you exist in this decentralized environment, like the project is a DAO. Number one, just because you are a DAO or organize or call yourself one doesn't mean you're truly decentralized, right? Number two, the fact that even if you are decentralized, which hits to the first tenet of Howie, that there's not this centralized management, right? And like the argument is that you fall outside the ambit of the definition of a security if you're truly decentralized. That alone doesn't exempt you from securities laws, commodities laws, money service business registration requirements. I mean, look at Tether, right? Tether isn't decentralized, doesn't claim to be, but they allow redemptions in Europe. They don't allow redemptions here. Why? Because they would have to register as an MSB, and that would require KYC on everybody. It's not even possible, right? It would just collapse. So it's an interesting thing, but when you look at all these other like DeFi platforms, right? And the reason I even bring this up is because so many DeFi platforms are getting hit with SEC subpoenas because a lot of the DEX and that are pushing through tokens that arguably are securities. And you can just look at the cases against like Coinbase and others, and it's not unlikely that the same arguments are being used to go after DeFi because, again, if you're like making a market in securities, right, and if like the SEC or another regulator claims that, a stable coin or some other token is a security, then you need to be registered at a minimum as a national securities exchange or an alternative trading system, and you're not, right? So you're violating the Securities Act. But all this talk about like safety and whatnot about DeFi and decentralized stable coins is, based on the decentralization argument, which I don't really see holding water, right? Like there isn't law, and I'll give this as like a devil's advocate. There isn't really any law out there, right, that delineates the legal status of a DAO. Like take the Wyoming DAO LLC. There's really nothing out there. And as we see with regulators as it relates to crypto, they're not legislating statutes that, impute certain obligations on all forms of crypto. What they're doing is they're just legislating by litigation, right? Like, so they're making a common law record of what's right and wrong, but they haven't really got to the issue of like decentralization and DAOs and like how people can and can't be held responsible, or can the DAO and are the individual members responsible? It's really a morass. It's a legal morass. But as much as I like the DeFi stablecoins, and they play a huge role in dApps and how you interact on them and whatnot, and like inherently there's a big problem because, and this is another conversation another time, they're backed by other stablecoins or other forms of crypto, and then that leads into like other issues like, are you a commodity because you're convertible into this? Are you a security because the underlying USDC may be deemed to be a security and the DeFi stablecoin is redeemable into that? So it becomes something else, like a swap or an option or a certificate of deposit, all of which are securities. So it's not immune from that. But what's definitely not immune from is the fact that you purport to be decentralized. Like the issuers are saying, well, we're decentralized, so we're immune from any sort of regulation. That doesn't work. I mean, it's a plausible argument and I get it, but there's nothing to date that has come through and said, yeah, like we're hands off. We can't do that as a regulator because there's no centralized management, right? There's no centralized control. That just doesn't exist yet. So I think you're taking like a risk, right? And I like what like Frax is doing and trying to like get Federal Reserve access and like building like DeFi ecospheres around the token. So it like adds this like kind of utility. And, we've talked about license, the concept of a license as it relates to the definition of what a crypto token can be. But I just think it's misguided. Like without question, DeFi stablecoins are like massively important and will become massively important because you can see where the emphasis is going to be on BUSD, USDT, USDC from a regulatory standpoint. And like these will exist in these like the nether regions of DeFi land, but it's not this like cure-all. So it's like, you want to find safety in this kind of crazy hectic time. It's not necessarily pulling out of like a centralized stablecoin and going to a decentralized DeFi stablecoin, because ultimately the same arguments that are used against the centralized ones will be used against the decentralized ones. There's no difference, right? So that's kind of like my rant, soapbox, whatever. But if you have questions about it or you're involved in like DeFi and want to figure out how these stablecoins can interplay with your DEX or anything like that, definitely hit me up, Adam at adamtracy.io, and I'll talk to you next time. Cheers.